Lawrence Okolie has been on a charm offensive since his insomnia-curing performance against David Light last weekend. He's been in the Sky Sports studio a couple of times and has said that he is willing to fight Richard Riakporhe or his friend Chris Billam-Smith in his next fight. He said he's spoken to Ben Shalom and everything is agreed on his end. He's just waiting for Riakporhe or Billam-Smith to respond. He said that given a choice of one or the other, he would prioritize the Riakporhe fight because it's a grudge match, but he's also willing to fight his former stablemate Billam-Smith because Billam-Smith apparently has a fight scheduled in 8 weeks and no opponent, I believe. So Okolie says he will give Billam-Smith the opportunity to fight for the WBO Cruiserweight World title in Bournemouth, Chris Billam-Smith's hometown. And hey, you can't say fairer than that, right? We criticize Okolie for being boring, but one thing I'll say about him, one thing I've always said about him, is that he never shies away from a challenge. Lawrence Okolie has stepped up at every stage of his career when he was supposed to do so. Fought all his domestic rivals, moved up to world level, challenged for a title, won a title, has defended his title a couple of times. He's apparently been trying to make unifications, but as I said in a previous video, commercially, those unifications probably don't make sense at this stage, at least not in the UK. I doubt Okolie's going to get the opportunity to unify unless he's willing to travel. I don't think Okolie has enough of a fan base in the UK to make it work as far as covering the purses. Therefore, these fights against Richard Riakporhe and Chris Billam-Smith might be his best option right now. Either one would be a voluntary title defense. Now, personally, I'd want to see him fight Riakporhe, not just because of the grudge, but also stylistically. I find it more interesting. Lawrence Okolie is so physically strong, and of course he's familiar with Chris Billam-Smith, having sparred him many times when they were both trained by Shane McGuigan. Of course, Billam-Smith still is trained by Shane McGuigan. I have to imagine that Okolie knows exactly how to neutralize Chris Billam-Smith, and it's the same way that he neutralizes many of his opponents, and that is by utilizing the clinch. He's so physically strong, he just shuts people down at mid and close range by grabbing them. So far, nobody has been able to get past that. And on the outside, Lawrence Okolie is a very dangerous operator. Didn't have much of a jab in his last fight, but that right hand is still potent. And he's got experience, Lawrence Okolie, so I'd like to see him go up against Richard Riakporhe. Riakporhe's had a few boring performances himself, or at least a few performances where he's clinched a lot, including the Chris Billam-Smith fight, by the way. Riakporhe was clinching loads in that fight. There was a lot of wrestling in that one. But for the most part, he does tend to win more cleanly and in a more crowd-pleasing fashion than Lawrence Okolie does, at least these days. And it's not like Lawrence Okolie has never put on an exciting performance, because he has. I thought his performance against Wadi Camacho was exciting. His performance against Luke Watkins was exciting. His performance against Krzysztof Glowacki was very good and clean for the most part, not too much clinching. Got his man out of there. So there has been fights when Okolie's been a crowd pleaser, but they have been few and far between, if we're going to be honest. Against Riakporhe, I'm wondering whether he will meet his match in terms of physical strength. I suspect Okolie is still a bit stronger than Riakporhe, but the Night Train might be the physically strongest guy Okolie's come up against in the professional ranks. And I want to see how he handles that. I want to see if Riakporhe can actually break free from the clinches and get punches off, or whether he can actually time Lawrence Okolie. When Okolie's coming in trying to clinch, maybe Riakporhe lands a big shot. They're both the same height, 6'5", very tall for cruiserweights. So that's the fight I would like to see next. Will Richard Riakporhe take the opportunity, or will he find a reason not to take it? If that happens, then will Chris Billam-Smith take the opportunity? Okolie clearly wants to redeem himself in the eyes of the British public. And UK boxing fans love domestic rivalries. Lawrence Okolie knows that, so that's what he's trying to give you. And I commend him for that. Let me know what you guys think in the comments.